Hi guys, welcome back to EGN Podcast. My name is Vlad. I'm your host of EGN Podcast. So today, as you can see from the title, we are going to view together with the AI. So it's not going to be necessarily a debate with the AI, but a discussion to get the information, in this case, needed. So recently, right, Mr. Trump has got into the office and it has been, a few days, not more than a week. And he has already put in place interesting things, executive orders. And me personally, I hear it like here and there. You can see it on Instagram. But what exactly he has already put in place, if you ask me, I don't know all the details. But that's why we'll get the help of my friend here, Perplexity AI. I have the Pro version. It's very good because it can allow you to do really deep research, different topics, but it can have also a discussion with you with the AI. So that's what we are going to do today. If you get value out of this video, subscribe, like, and share. So let's get right into it. I will inform the AI that we are going to discuss about it, and then we'll go step by step about the points that he has done. And let's jump into it. So my friend here. Hey there.
Hi there. How can I help you today?
Yep. So what we are going to do, we are going to see together the things that Mr. President, let me finish, Mr. Donald Trump has signed since his January 20th inauguration in 2025. His record-breaking 26 executive orders on his first day in office. So we are going to see together each one. And I want you to start with the declaring a national emergency at the southern border.
On January 20th, 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order declaring a national emergency at the southern border.
Okay.
This action invoked the National Emergencies Act to address what he described as a crisis of record-breaking illegal immigration. The order directed the deployment of additional military personnel, including the National Guard, to the border and prioritized completing the border wall. It also granted the Department of Homeland Security enhanced flexibility for operations near the border. This move reflects Trump's broader immigration agenda, but is expected to face legal and political challenges.
Why is that?
The declaration of a national emergency at the southern border by President Donald Trump on January 20th, 2025, was driven by what his administration described as a crisis caused by record levels of illegal immigration and its associated consequences. Between fiscal years 2021 and 2024, there were over 8.7 million border encounters, with significant increases in drug trafficking, gang activity, and child trafficking. The administration argued that these issues endangered public safety and national security, necessitating immediate action to regain operational control of the border.
Okay. So basically, he's doing what he said he will do. He has declared a national emergency at the southern border to basically close the border.
Yes, President Trump is following through on his campaign promise by declaring a national emergency at the southern border to address what he describes as a
Okay.
crisis of
Keeping his
illegal
word.
immigration, drug trafficking, and human smuggling. This action allows him to bypass Congress to reallocate federal funds for completing the border wall and deploying military personnel to secure the area. The administration argues this is necessary for national security and public safety, but it has already sparked legal and political challenges over the use of emergency powers.
And what exactly does it include? Like, tell me exactly the details.
President Trump's executive order declaring a national emergency at the southern border includes several key measures.
Mm-hmm.
It directs the Secretary of Defense to deploy additional military personnel, including active duty troops and the National Guard,
So more
to
people,
assist in securing the
more
border.
army.
This involves logistical support, transportation, and constructing physical barriers like the border wall. The Department of Homeland Security is given flexibility to operate air surveillance missions, and unmanned
Flexibility.
aerial systems will be used for monitoring. The order also suspends migrant entry and asylum requests under the claim of an invasion at the border.
Okay, and you said that they will use aerial surveillance techniques. What does it mean exactly?
Yes, the executive order includes aerial surveillance as part of its measures to secure the southern border. Specifically, it directs the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, to operate unmanned aerial systems, UAS, such as drones, for monitoring and countering unauthorized activities. It also waives Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and Federal Communications Commission, FCC, regulations within 5 miles of the border to enhance DHS's ability to use these systems effectively. These aerial assets will complement other technologies like ground sensors, thermal imaging, and radar to provide comprehensive situational awareness.
Interesting. And the goal of that is to decrease the number of illegal migrants, right?
Yes, the goal of using aerial surveillance and other measures under the National Emergency Declaration is to reduce the number of illegal migrants crossing the southern border. This includes deploying drones, helicopters, and other unmanned
Okay.
systems to monitor activity, detect unauthorized crossings, and support law enforcement operations. These tools aim to enhance border security by providing real-time intelligence, deterring crossings, and aiding in the apprehension of individuals attempting to enter unlawfully.
Interesting. So basically, he's doing what he said he will do. He's increasing the security, putting new ways of controlling it. So basically, following up with his, uh, well, commitments that he mentioned in his election.
Yes, President Trump is indeed following through on his campaign promises to strengthen border security.
Respect.
By declaring a national emergency at the southern border, he has implemented measures such as deploying military forces.
That's good. So we got that portion. Now, there are about 26 record-breaking executive orders, and we are going to go to each one. Second one, abolition of birthright citizenship. What is that?
President Trump's executive order to abolish birthright citizenship seeks to redefine the 14th Amendment by excluding children born in the U.S. to parents who are undocumented or on temporary visas. The order claims such children are not subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S., thus not eligible for automatic citizenship. It has sparked immediate legal challenges, as birthright citizenship is a constitutional guarantee upheld for over a century. Critics argue the president lacks authority to unilaterally alter this right, and a federal judge has already temporarily blocked its enforcement.
So basically, he wants to block people who came in illegally to United States of having children, and the children automatically being U.S. citizens, right?
Yes, President Trump's executive order aims to prevent children born in the U.S. to undocumented immigrants or parents on temporary visas from automatically gaining citizenship. This move targets what he describes as birth tourism and the practice of undocumented individuals crossing the border to give birth, ensuring their children become U.S. citizens. The order reinterprets the 14th Amendment, arguing these children are not subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S.
And let's say, as of today, if that type of thing happens, meaning somebody who came into US illegally and they have children, the children gets automatically US citizenship. What happens to the parents if they are like deported or ordered to deport?
If undocumented parents in the U.S. have children who are U.S. citizens and the parents are ordered to be deported, the situation can be complex. The U.S.-born children retain their citizenship and have the right to stay in the country. Parents may arrange for their children to remain with relatives, friends, or guardians in the U.S., or they may choose to take their children with them to their home country. However, if no arrangements are made, the child could enter the child welfare system. Deportation often leads to family separation, which can have significant emotional and logistical challenges for both parents and children.
Okay, then what will be the main reason of Trump wanting to just abolish the birth citizenship for illegal migrants? Because
The
that's a
main
valid
reason
question, no?
President Trump seeks to abolish birthright citizenship for children of undocumented migrants or those on temporary visas is to deter illegal immigration.
Okay.
His administration argues that the current policy creates an incentive for individuals to enter the U.S. unlawfully or temporarily to secure citizenship for their children, often referred to as anchor babies. Trump
Makes
believes
sense.
this undermines immigration control and imposes economic and social burdens on the country. Critics, however, argue that this move violates the 14th Amendment and is unlikely.
Okay, well, that's what he wants to do. I understand the point. Is to disincentivize, people coming to US to have children, and then the children has the citizenship until the children can stay there, and then eventually they can potentially bring back their parents if they are deported. I guess that's the reason. Okay, let's go to number 3: suspension of refugee admissions.
President Trump's executive order suspending the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, USRAP, indefinitely, effective January 27, 2025, halts all refugee arrivals into the country. The administration
Okay.
argues this is necessary to prioritize public safety, national security, and
But
assimilation,
what is that?
citing record migration levels that strain local resources. Exceptions may be granted on a case-by-case basis if deemed in the national interest. This suspension leaves thousands of refugees in limbo, including those already vetted and approved for resettlement, and has drawn criticism for undermining humanitarian commitments and endangering vulnerable populations.
So, okay, can you explain me just simply, like, what's the point of it?
The point of suspending refugee admissions is to reduce the strain on U.S. resources and address security concerns. The Trump
So they
administration
are not
argues that the
taking
current system
refugees
is
anymore?
overwhelmed by record migration levels, and that pausing refugee intake allows the government to focus on border security and ensuring proper vetting. It also aligns with Trump's broader immigration agenda to limit entry into the U.S. and prioritize domestic stability over international humanitarian commitments.
Okay, so the goal is basically to stop for now refugee processing or acceptance to the country.
Yes, the goal of President Trump's executive order suspending refugee admissions is to temporarily halt the processing and acceptance of refugees into the United States. The
Okay.
administration justifies this by citing record migration levels, concerns over national security.
Okay, we get that part. So let's go to not reason, order number 4, right? That Mr. Trump has put in place. Designated cartels as terrorist organization. That's wild. Not that it's not to be done, but yeah.
President Trump's executive order to designate drug cartels as terrorist organizations aims to combat their influence by treating them as national security threats rather than just criminal entities. This designation would allow the U.S. to impose stricter measures, such as freezing assets, prosecuting individuals for providing material support, and enhancing law enforcement tools to disrupt cartel operations. The move targets cartels like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua, citing their role in drug trafficking, violence, and destabilization. However, it has raised concerns about potential impacts on U.S.-Mexico relations and risks of escalating violence.
But what exactly does it mean that, he's putting them as terrorist organizations? Meaning, because already they are they're not considered non-criminal, so they're considered criminal. But putting them in a case of terrorist organization, what it imply? What changes?
Designating drug cartels as terrorist organizations fundamentally changes how the U.S. government can address them. This
Okay.
classification allows for stronger legal and military actions, such as freezing their assets, prosecuting individuals for materially supporting them, and even authorizing military force against them, similar to how
Okay.
the U.S. handles foreign terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. It also enables broader intelligence sharing and international cooperation to dismantle these organizations. However, it risks straining U.S.-Mexico relations and could escalate violence in regions where cartels operate.
Okay, well, and do we know what is the reaction of those organizations regarding to this executive order, or any prominent people who are talking about it?
The reaction to Trump's executive order designating cartels as terrorist organizations has been mixed. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum strongly opposes the move, emphasizing Mexico's sovereignty and rejecting unilateral U.S. actions. She insists on bilateral cooperation to combat cartels, but warns against military interventions which could strain U.S.-Mexico relations.
Agreed.
Analysts and experts have also expressed concerns, with some arguing the designation risks escalating violence without addressing root causes like U.S. drug demand and gun laws. Cartels themselves have not publicly responded, but heightened enforcement could provoke retaliatory violence.
Okay, interesting. Now let's go through the energy and environment part. So Trump declared a national energy emergency.
President Trump's declaration of a national energy emergency focuses on boosting domestic fossil fuel production and reducing reliance on foreign energy. The order prioritizes oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear power, and other non-renewable resources while excluding wind and solar energy. It directs federal agencies to expedite permitting, reduce environmental regulations, and use emergency powers to fast-track energy projects. Trump argues this is necessary to lower energy prices, ensure national security, and meet growing energy demands. But critics view it as favoring fossil fuel industries at the expense of environmental protections.
Okay, but if you sum it up, so who are benefiting from this order and who are not benefiting from it?
The main beneficiaries of Trump's national energy emergency declaration are fossil fuel companies and industries tied to traditional energy production, such as oil, gas, coal, and nuclear. They benefit from reduced environmental regulations, expedited permitting processes, and expanded access to federal lands for energy projects.
Okay.
This could lead to increased profits and job creation in those sectors. On the other hand, renewable energy industries like wind and solar are excluded from the order's scope, potentially losing out on federal support and resources. Environmental groups and communities concerned about
Not a good
climate
time to buy
change
those stocks.
also see this as a setback due to weakened environmental protections and potential ecological harm.
Okay, so not a good time to buy stocks regarding solar, correct?
Given President Trump's focus on fossil fuels and the exclusion of solar and wind energy from his national energy emergency declaration, the renewable energy sector, including solar, may face significant challenges in the near term. This policy shift has already caused uncertainty and declining stock values for renewable companies due to reduced federal support and halted projects. If you're considering investing in solar stocks,
I'm not.
it might not be an ideal time, as the market is likely to remain under pressure until more favorable policies or market conditions emerge.
Okay, so let's go to the next executive order: withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement.
President Trump's executive order to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement reflects his administration's focus on prioritizing economic concerns over global climate commitments. The Paris Agreement, signed by nearly 200 nations, is a voluntary pact aimed at limiting global warming by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Trump argues that the agreement imposes unfair financial and regulatory burdens on the U.S., particularly on industries like fossil fuels, while benefiting other nations such as China. Critics warn that this decision isolates the U.S. diplomatically, undermines its leadership in clean energy innovation, and could hinder global efforts to combat climate change.
And please explain to me who are the countries that are part of the Paris Climate Agreement and how much was it costing US?
The Paris Climate Agreement includes 194 states and the European Union, representing over 98% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
Major participants include the United States, before its withdrawal, China, India, and the EU. The agreement aims to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. For the U.S., the financial cost of participation included contributions to the Green Climate Fund, which assists developing nations in combating climate change. President Trump argued this cost was significant, though estimates varied. Critics noted that U.S. commitments were non-binding and relatively modest compared to its economic size.
And how are so those countries are contributing to this Paris Climate Agreement, but how are they helping climate change?
Countries participating in the Paris Climate Agreement contribute to combating climate change primarily through their nationally determined contributions, NDCs. These are self-set goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions,
Then what's the point of being
transition to
part of it?
renewable energy, and implement adaptation measures for climate resilience. For example, nations may invest in cleaner technologies, improve energy efficiency, or protect forests to absorb carbon dioxide. Developed countries also provide financial support to help developing nations mitigate and adapt to climate impacts, including a commitment to mobilize $100 billion annually for climate finance. However, progress varies, and many countries are not fully meeting their pledges.
But let me get this straight. So they are contributing financially to this Paris Climate Agreement, but countries are themselves putting their goals set. But what's the point of contributing to that Paris Climate Agreement if they can simply use themselves the amounts and decide whatever target they want to hit? Like, what's the point of being part of that agreement? What's the point?
The Paris Climate Agreement serves as a global framework for collective action against climate
Collective
change.
action, okay.
While countries set their own goals,
Okay.
NDCs, being part of the agreement ensures accountability, transparency, and collaboration. It provides mechanisms like regular reporting, global stocktakes, and compliance reviews to track progress and encourage stronger commitments. Financial contributions, such as to the Green Climate Fund, support developing nations in transitioning to low-carbon economies and adapting to climate impacts. The agreement fosters international cooperation, which is essential for addressing a global issue like climate change that transcends national borders.
Can you tell me, please, who are the main donors of that agreement? And yeah.
The main donors to the Paris Climate Agreement's financial mechanisms, such as the Green Climate Fund, GCF, are developed countries. Key contributors include the United States, France, Germany, Japan, and the United Kingdom, which provide the largest sums in absolute terms. For example, France contributed $7.2 billion in climate finance in 2023, while the U.S. pledged $3 billion to the GCF during its replenishment cycle. Countries like Sweden and Norway also contribute significantly relative to their economic size, with Sweden recently pledging SEK 8 billion to the GCF. These funds support climate adaptation and mitigation efforts in developing nations.
But why are they giving the money to that, climate agreement? Like, yeah, it's good that they have some framework and they have somebody who is keeping them accountable and all that, but what's the point of giving the money to that fund? Meaning, what's the point? Like, they can just use the money, each country themselves, and work on their goals that they themselves put, and then report to that agreement what they achieved. What's the point of giving the money to that fund? Maybe I'm not getting something.
The main point of contributing money to the Paris Climate Agreement's fund, such as the Green Climate Fund, is to support developing countries in addressing climate change. Many developing
Developing
nations lack the
countries.
financial resources,
Okay.
technology, and infrastructure to reduce emissions or adapt to climate impacts like droughts, floods, and rising sea levels. The funds help these countries transition to clean energy, build climate-resilient infrastructure, and mitigate damage caused by climate change. Without this financial support, global efforts would be fragmented because poorer nations cannot act effectively on their own. By pooling resources through the
Agreed.
agreement,
Agreed.
developed countries ensure that all nations can participate in combating climate change, which is a global issue requiring collective action. This also fosters international collaboration and accountability in achieving shared climate goals.
Are there any tools in which or that they can use that agreement to force countries to achieve those targets and put extra amount and all that? Are there any tools?
The Paris Climate Agreement does not have hard enforcement tools to force countries to meet their targets or contribute financially. Instead, it relies on transparency, peer pressure, and international accountability mechanisms.
Okay.
Countries must submit regular reports on their progress toward their self-set goals, NDCs, and participate in a global stocktake every 5 years to assess collective progress. There is no system of penalties for non-compliance, but the agreement includes a compliance committee under Article 15, which provides non-adversarial support to help countries meet their commitments. Wealthier nations are also expected to assist poorer ones financially, but these
Okay.
contributions are not legally enforceable. Essentially, the agreement depends on diplomacy and mutual trust rather than coercion.
And how much would you say that US is going to save in terms of money by not contributing amounts to combat climate change in the world by helping even other countries?
By withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, the U.S. avoids contributing to international climate finance mechanisms like the
Yeah.
Green Climate Fund,
Yeah.
GCF. Under previous commitments, the U.S. had pledged $3 billion to the
$3
GCF,
billion.
of which $1 billion was delivered.
Okay.
Future financial contributions could have ranged significantly higher, as developed countries collectively committed to mobilizing at least $100 billion annually for climate action in developing nations.
Okay.
By not participating, the U.S. saves these contributions but risks losing global influence and collaboration in addressing climate
I don't
change.
think so. Okay, great. So let's go to the other interesting executive order that Trump put in place. This one is talking about federal workforce and governance. So, return in person work. Can you tell me more about that, please?
President Trump's executive order mandating the return of federal employees to in-person work aims to end remote work arrangements
No
and
more
bring
remote
all
work.
eligible federal workers back to their offices full-time. The administration argues that this move will improve government efficiency, reduce service backlogs, and ensure better public service. Trump has criticized telework as a
Not bad.
significant obstacle to productivity and accountability, citing concerns about empty federal offices and delayed services for Americans. However, critics, including federal employee unions, argue that many tasks are performed effectively remotely and that the mandate disregards modern workplace flexibility and employee well-being.
Yeah, of course. That's the main counter argument. But hey, okay. And if we continue in the same topic, so hiring freeze. Can you tell me more about that?
President Trump's hiring freeze for federal civilian employees halts the filling of vacant positions and the creation of new roles across executive departments for 90 days, with some exceptions. This measure is intended to cut costs, streamline government operations, and reduce the federal workforce through attrition. Exemptions apply to roles related to national security,
Military, yeah.
public safety, immigration enforcement, and essential services like Social Security and Medicare. Critics argue the freeze could create staffing gaps, hinder public services, and deter skilled workers from joining the government. The IRS faces an extended freeze,
Okay,
impacting its
whoa.
operations significantly.
Why is IRS specifically getting, all the heat?
The IRS is receiving specific attention under Trump's hiring freeze because of its central role in tax collection and enforcement, as well as its recent
Okay.
expansion under the Biden administration.
Hmm.
Trump and many Republicans have criticized the IRS for its increased funding and hiring initiatives, particularly the addition of thousands of agents funded by the Inflation
I remember
Reduction
that.
Act.
Yep.
This criticism is tied to concerns about government overreach and fears that new agents would disproportionately target ordinary taxpayers. By imposing an indefinite hiring freeze on the IRS, Trump aims to reverse these expansions and reduce its operational capacity. This aligns with his broader agenda of limiting federal government size and influence. However, this freeze comes just before tax season, raising concerns about delays in processing returns, issuing refunds, and conducting audits, especially for complex cases. Critics argue that this move could hinder the IRS's ability to function effectively and serve taxpayers during a critical
How?
period.
But how will it not help, because there were added about 1,000 people more during the Biden administration, and he's basically cleaning up and bringing it back to normal numbers of people. He's not making the stuff even less than what was before the 1,000 people came in, correct?
You're correct that Trump's hiring freeze for the IRS is not reducing its workforce below pre-Biden levels. The Biden
Yeah,
administration had
so
expanded the
makes sense.
IRS, adding thousands of employees using Inflation Reduction Act funds to improve enforcement and customer service. Trump's freeze
Enforcement and
halts further
customer
hiring,
service.
effectively reversing Biden's expansion plans but not cutting below the agency's pre-expansion size. While this may seem like a return to normal, critics argue that the freeze could still hinder operations, especially during tax season, as the IRS typically hires seasonal workers to manage increased workloads.
Interesting. So that's not a bad thing in my opinion. So let's continue.
Yes, it's an interesting dynamic. Trump's hiring freeze.
It is. And how about restoring accountability in federal workforce? What is that about?
President Trump's executive order on restoring accountability in the federal workforce reinstates a controversial policy known as Schedule F, which reclassifies certain federal employees in policy-influencing positions as at-will workers. This change makes it easier to hire and fire these employees without the usual civil service protections. The administration argues this will ensure accountability and align the workforce with the president's agenda by removing underperforming or politically opposed workers. Critics, however, warn that it politicizes the federal workforce, undermines due process, and risks replacing career professionals with politically loyal appointees.
Okay, so but if you summarize it in a few points, so the goal of it is to basically make it more accountable.
Yes, the goal of restoring accountability in the federal workforce is to make it more efficient and aligned with the administration's objectives. By reclassifying certain positions as at will, it aims to remove underperforming employees more easily, reduce bureaucratic resistance, and ensure that key roles are filled by individuals who support the president's policies. However, this approach raises concerns about politicization and job security for federal workers.
Okay, okay. Let's continue with anything related to social policies. Um, based on what I see here, based on what I see here, he's ending diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, right?
President Trump's executive order to end diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) programs dismantles initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity and addressing systemic discrimination within the federal government. It revokes long-standing directives, such as Lyndon B. Johnson's 1965 Executive Order 1246, which required non-discriminatory hiring practices for federal contractors.
Okay.
Trump argues these programs promote illegal discrimination and insists on a merit-based colorblind approach. This order places federal DEI staff on administrative leave ends funding for DEI initiatives, and bans contractors from adjusting their workforce based on race, gender, or other identities. Critics warn it undermines efforts to address inequality.
So in a nutshell, basically, he's stopping the hiring process just based on diversity, equity, inclusion for federal agencies. Important to highlight, and he's focusing on individual merit. Correct?
Yes, that's correct. President Trump's executive order ends diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) programs in federal agencies and focuses on hiring and promotions based solely on individual merit.
Okay, interesting. Tell me what you think about that in the comment section. But let's continue. So we can also see that he's defending biological sex definitions. This is a very interesting one. Shouldn't be controversial, but it's interesting.
President Trump's executive order on defending biological sex definitions directs federal agencies to define gender strictly based on biological sex at birth, rejecting gender identity as a basis for federal policy. This means government documents, policies, and programs will only recognize male and female as determined by reproductive biology. The administration argues this move protects women's rights, ensures fairness in areas like sports, and restores
Key point.
biological truth to federal governance. However, it eliminates protections for transgender, non-binary, and intersex individuals in areas such as healthcare, education, and federal accommodations, sparking legal challenges and significant controversy.
But in reality, so he directs federal agencies to use just sex instead of gender in policies and documents. So basically, in the policies, it will be used the sex of the person, not the gender or how the person identifies.
Yes, President Trump's executive order directs federal agencies to use sex instead of gender in all policies, documents, and official business.
Okay, got it.
This means that government records, such as passports and federal forms, will reflect a person's biological sex assigned at birth rather than their gender identity.
Okay. Interesting point. So let's go to free speech and government oversight. This is very key point. If you watch the previous AI debate, this is going to be about that. He's restoring freedom of speech, correct?
Yes, President Trump's executive order on restoring freedom of speech and ending federal censorship is focused on ensuring that the federal government does not interfere with Americans' constitutionally protected free speech. It prohibits federal agencies from using resources to suppress speech, particularly on online platforms, and directs the Attorney General to investigate past government actions that may have pressured social media companies to censor content. Trump argues this restores First Amendment rights and prevents government overreach in moderating public discourse.
Yes, and this is basically also directed to Biden's administration. And in the last AI debate, we spoke about it in length. So if you want to check it out, it's in my videos. But let's continue. So he's also ending weaponization of the federal government. What does it mean?
President Trump's executive order to end the weaponization of the federal government aims to address what he describes as abuses of power by federal agencies during the previous administration. It directs the Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence to investigate instances where federal law enforcement or intelligence agencies may have targeted individuals based on political views, religious beliefs, or lawful activities. The goal is to restore public trust by ensuring that federal agencies remain neutral and do not misuse their authority for political purposes. This reflects Trump's broader push for accountability and transparency in government operations.
Okay, interesting. So basically, he doesn't want for the government to go after any political opponents. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The executive order aims to prevent federal agencies from being used to target political opponents or individuals based on their political beliefs or affiliations.
That's exactly what it is.
Trump is seeking to ensure that government power is not misused for partisan purposes, promoting neutrality and fairness
Key point,
in law
we'll
enforcement
see,
and
we'll ask.
intelligence operations. This move is framed as a way to rebuild public trust in federal institutions.
Because would you say he's doing it because he was persecuted by the Department of Justice this last 2-3 years by the previous administration?
Yes, President Trump's executive order to end the weaponization of the federal government appears to be influenced by his own experiences with the Department of Justice during the Biden administration. Over the past few years, Trump has faced multiple investigations, including the search of Mar-a-Lago for classified documents and charges related to election interference on January 6th. He has consistently framed these actions as politically motivated persecution aimed at undermining his political career and re-election efforts. This executive order reflects his commitment to preventing what he sees as partisan misuse of federal agencies against political opponents, ensuring neutrality and fairness in government operations.
Okay, so we have a couple of more here. There are many more, but let's keep it short. The main ones we are talking about are the interesting ones, and we'll keep the best one for the end. So he had also, in terms of international relations, he withdrew from the World Health Organization. What does it mean, and what is it exactly?
President Trump's executive order to withdraw the U.S. from the World Health Organization, WHO, reflects his dissatisfaction with the organization's handling of global health crises, particularly the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yep.
He criticized the WHO for being slow to respond, overly influenced by China, and failing to implement necessary reforms. The withdrawal involves halting U.S. funding, historically the largest contribution to the WHO, and recalling American personnel. Trump argues this move will protect U.S. sovereignty and redirect resources toward domestic health priorities. But critics warn it could weaken global health initiatives and reduce the U.S.'s influence in combating pandemics and other health threats.
And when he says he's withdrawing from the World Health Organization, what it meaning exactly? Like, it means that he's just not going to contribute money to that organization?
When President Trump says he is withdrawing the U.S. from the World Health Organization, WHO, it means the U.S. will no longer be a member of the organization, cease financial contributions, and recall American personnel working with the WHO. The U.S. has been the largest donor, contributing about 18% of its budget, or approximately $261 million annually. By withdrawing, Trump aims to redirect these funds to domestic health priorities and avoid what he views as unfair financial burdens and political bias within the WHO. However, critics warn this could weaken global health efforts and reduce U.S. influence in international health crises.
Interesting. And can we say that he's basically cutting costs of the business, which is AKA his country?
Yes. By withdrawing from the World Health Organization, WHO, President Trump is essentially cutting costs for the U.S. government, which he views as onerous and unfairly high compared to other nations' contributions. The U.S. has been the largest donor, contributing up to $1.28 billion in the 2022-2023 biennium, including both assessed and voluntary contributions. Trump argues that these funds can be redirected to domestic priorities, reducing what he sees as unnecessary spending on an organization he criticizes for inefficiency and political bias.
Agreed.
This move...
Political bias, that's interesting. And the one of the last ones, trade policy review. So Trump reviewed the trade policy regarding the USMCA. What is that and what it means actually?
President Trump's review of the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, trade
Mm,
policy involves reassessing and potentially
tariffs.
renegotiating the agreement before its scheduled review in 2026. The USMCA, which replaced NAFTA in 2020, governs trade among the US, Canada, and Mexico. Trump argues that changes are needed to address issues like US trade debt.
Okay, something happened. Let's talk again. So, can you please come back again and explain the Trump executive order regarding trade policy review, which USMCA?
President Trump's recent executive order on trade policy, issued on January 20th, 2025,
Mm-hmm.
includes a comprehensive review of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA.
Mm-hmm. Which means?
This review aims to assess its impact on American workers, businesses, and industries. The order also initiates preparations for the statutorily mandated 2026 USMCA review, potentially setting the stage for renegotiations.
Okay,
Trump
okay.
has hinted at imposing new tariffs on Canada and Mexico
Yeah.
if their trade practices are deemed unfair or non-compliant with USMCA terms.
Tell me what you think about
This
it.
could significantly
Comments.
disrupt trade within the region and affect US-Mexico-Canada economic relations.
Okay, so last but not least, let's go into some of the most controversial one, which is pardon of January 6 rioters. Tell me more about that.
On January 20th, 2025, President Donald Trump issued sweeping pardons to over 1,150 individuals charged in connection with the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. This included full pardons for nonviolent offenses like trespassing and disorderly conduct, as well as more serious crimes such as assaulting law enforcement and seditious conspiracy. Additionally, he commuted the sentences of 14 far-right group members, including leaders of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Trump justified the move as addressing what he called a grave national injustice, but it drew sharp criticism for undermining accountability for the attack.
Interesting. So basically, he pardoned the people who were put to prison as rioters to that attacked, quote unquote, the Capitol.
Yes, President Trump pardoned over 1,500 individuals charged in connection with the January 6th Capitol riot, including those convicted of serious offenses like assaulting police and seditious conspiracy. This included prominent figures like Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio and Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes, whose sentences were commuted to time served. Trump justified the move as correcting what he called a grave national injustice. But critics argued it undermined accountability for the attack and could embolden future political violence.
Are there any proofs that those people attacked police?
Yes, there is substantial evidence that many individuals involved in the January 6th Capitol riot attacked police officers. Around 140 officers were injured, making it one of the largest mass assaults on law enforcement in U.S. history. Video footage, court testimonies, and physical evidence document rioters using weapons like flagpoles, batons, and chemical sprays against officers. Specific cases include assaults on Officer Michael Fanone, who was beaten and stunned with a taser, and Officer Daniel Hodges, who was crushed in a door while defending the Capitol.
Okay, and how many FBI agents were present during that riot? Undercover or not undercover?
According to a December 2024 report by the Department of Justice's Inspector General, there were no undercover FBI agents present during the January 6th Capitol riot. However, 26 FBI informants, also known as confidential human sources, were in Washington, D.C. for events related to that day. Among them,
So they
4
were
entered the
present.
Capitol, and 13 accessed restricted areas around it. None of these informants were authorized to participate in illegal activities or incite violence, and their presence was primarily for intelligence gathering.
Primarily for intelligence gathering, but they were present during those quote-unquote riots. But hey, let's not go into it today. If you want to get more of it, let me know. We can do a discussion with this AI and do your research yourself. So that's about that. And one of the other points that Mr. Trump has put in place is restoration of the federal death penalty. Can you explain more?
President Trump recently reinstated the federal death penalty, reversing a moratorium imposed by President Biden in 2021. This move allows federal executions to resume for individuals convicted of capital crimes, such as terrorism or mass killings. Trump justified the decision as a way to strengthen law and order and deter heinous crimes. Critics, however, argue that it raises ethical concerns and risks wrongful executions. The reinstatement aligns with Trump's broader tough-on-crime stance, which has been central to his policies during his second term.
So, okay, but does it mean that every state has this right?
The federal death penalty applies across all U.S. states and territories, regardless of whether a state itself permits capital punishment. If someone commits a federal capital crime in a state without the death penalty, federal law can still impose it. In such cases, executions are carried out in a state that permits the death penalty. This system ensures the federal government can enforce its laws uniformly. But it has raised concerns about federal overreach in states that have abolished capital punishment.
Interesting. So basically, he wants to make it more severe.
Basically, the reinstatement of the federal death penalty means that the federal government can impose capital punishment for federal crimes, even in states that have abolished the death penalty. This creates a dual system where federal law can override state policies in specific cases, reinforcing federal authority, but also sparking debates about state.
But the goal of it to avoid or to punish or to disincentivize people of doing those types of crimes, correct?
Yes. Okay. The goal of reinstating the federal death penalty is to punish the most severe crimes, such as terrorism or mass murder, and to deter others from committing similar offenses. Proponents argue that it serves as a strong deterrent and delivers justice for...
For that part, we'll see in the future. I mean, hopefully nothing that type of happens that they need to use it, but it is what it is. And last but not least, so revocation of electric vehicle mandates. Tell me more about that.
President Trump recently signed an executive order revoking Biden-era electric vehicle, EV policies, which had aimed for 50% of new car sales to be electric by 2030.
50%?
The order halts unspent funds for EV charging infrastructure, calls for repealing California's waiver to phase out gas-powered cars by 2035, and seeks to eliminate subsidies like the $7,500 federal EV tax credit. Trump framed the move as promoting consumer choice and reducing costs. But critics argue it could slow the transition to cleaner energy and hinder efforts to combat climate change.
Okay, so okay, interesting. So if we look at all of those executive orders, we can say that Trump is basically keeping his word that he gave during his campaign, and he's implementing whatever he promised, step by step. Not everything, but step by step.
Yes. Based on his recent executive orders, President Trump appears to be systematically implementing many of the promises he made during his campaign.
Walking the talk.
From pardoning January 6th rioters and revoking electric vehicle mandates to reinstating the federal death penalty and prioritizing energy production. These actions align with his stated goals. While not every promise has been addressed yet, his approach reflects a deliberate effort to fulfill his campaign agenda step by step.
Great. So I'll just stop the recording here. Well, so these are the updates. So in total, from what I saw here, there are 26 executive orders already signed. One that we didn't touch on it, and it was done just recently, like I think a day or two ago, and we will confer with the AI here just to see. AI, can you hear me? It just came up to my mind. Okay, you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
How about the Trump executive order to withdraw security from Dr. Anthony Fauci? Tell me more about it. This is interesting.
President Trump revoked Dr. Anthony Fauci's federally funded security detail on January 23, 2025. Fauci, who faced death threats during the COVID-19 pandemic due to his prominent public health role, will now rely on private security at his own expense. Trump justified the move by stating that former officials cannot receive lifetime government protection, and argued that Fauci, like others whose security was also revoked, could afford private arrangements. Critics view this as part of a broader campaign of retribution against former officials critical of Trump.
Has Fauci been critical of Trump?
Yes, Dr. Anthony Fauci has been critical of former President Trump, particularly during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. While their relationship started amicably, tensions grew as Fauci publicly contradicted Trump on issues like reopening the economy and vaccine immunity. Fauci described their relationship as complicated, noting that he felt obligated to correct misinformation despite respecting the office of the presidency.
Talk
Trump,
about
in turn,
misinformation.
criticized Fauci, calling him a disaster and accusing him of mistakes during the pandemic. This dynamic contributed to ongoing political and personal clashes between them.
Okay, thanks. So basically, he took off the security that was funded by the government, by the taxpayers. He took it off. Why he's doing that? I mean, it's one of the ways he can have an impact on him, because on Fauci, because Mr. Biden, 2 hours or 3 hours, I don't know how many hours before the inauguration, pardoned in advance Mr. Fauci. And one of the only things that, Trump can do in this case is hurt his pocket. So take off the security. Now it's going to cost himself to pay for his security. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Decide for yourself. But here it is. So those are many executive orders that Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, has put in place, President of the United States. In total, there are 26. I think we have touched at least minimum, I would say 10 or 15 in today's video. So if you like these types of discussions with the AI, the debates we are doing, the previous videos, you can see more to come also. Like, subscribe, and share. Tell to people to watch this, to have an information regarding those orders, because even myself, I learned a lot of things in this discussion with the AI, because time is really going fast. A lot of things are happening, and this information can be crucial, for the future decisions of anybody, actually, whether you live in the United States or you don't live in the United States. Still, it is crucial. It is important to know. So if you find value in this video, subscribe, like, and share. If you want yourself to talk, and try this tool, which is the AI, it must be a tool. It's a good tool for research for anybody. So it's Perplexity AI. If you want to use the Pro version, you can. I put a link down below. If you want to have a discount for your first month, you can use that link. If not, you can even use the free version. It is still good. And it gives you a lot of options regarding the type of AI model you want to use, and they update it continually. So that's about it. So tell me what you think is outrageous in comments about these orders, what is coming, what is good, and you agree with it. Tell me all of it in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next video. My name is Vlad. I'm your host of EGN Podcast.